Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this video lesson. We're going to work on this lab where we're going to be drawing a right triangle with nested loops. The first thing to notice is that the user must enter a number from 1 to 15. If they do not, for example in this first sample run, they entered -5. So we're going to return a string that says invalid input, and we're going to ask them to try again. Enter a whole number from 1 to 15. Well, they entered a number that was too big. Invalid input. Finally, they get it right. They enter a whole number from 1 to 15, which is 5 in this case. And so we are drawing an asterisk we're drawing a triangle, a right triangle made out of asterisks. All right, and then the rule is that we're supposed to only use a while statement, or in this case, nested while statements, to create this particular program. All right, so let's switch over here to Visual Studio. I've already created the program, so let me just talk about it. In the declaration section, I'm thinking, okay, first of all, I have to create a number of rows. Here's row 1, here's row 2, row 3. You'll notice the pattern from row 1 to row 2. Notice that the number of columns increases by 1. So how many columns do I have for this first row? 1. How many columns do I have? 1, 2. How many columns over here for this row? 1, 2, 3. So every time we are going to be generating asterisks, or stars, I'll just say, stars for a new row, we increment the number of them by 1. And how many should we increment by? Well, we should increment by 1, but how many times shall we do this loop? Well, up to the user number, 5. So when we get to the point where we have 5 stars, and the user number is 5, that's going to be the last row that we will create. This is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and every single row will have a certain number of column of stars. And so that's why you'll see over here, I've created 2 variables, row and column, to indicate how many, or what row we're on, or what column that we're on. I'm going to obtain the user number. I'm going to start off with the number of stars per row is 1, because as you can see over here on our first row we have 1 star, just like we have over here. And I'm going to send everything to a variable called output, and then at the very end of my program I will send output to the console. Alright, well the first thing to do is to get the user input. So I'm going to ask the user to enter a whole number. They're going to enter that number. Now, while that number is less than 1, or if it's greater than 15, in other words, it's not in the range 1 all the way up to and including 15. If it's outside of that range, that's what this while statement with the OR logical operator is trying to determine. So if I enter negative something, right? Okay, well -3 is less than 1. That's a true statement. True or anything is true, so that means we have a number out of the range. So we're going to say invalid input. Let's skip a line and let's ask them once again. Enter a whole number from 1 to 15. And we're going to keep on doing this until you finally enter a number that is correct. Once you've got that, let's get ready to draw our right triangle. Well, first of all, let's start off with row number 1, which is this row right here, this row. All right, we're going to start off with row equal to 1. As long as the row is less than or equal to the user number, then we're going to keep on doing this outer loop over and over again. So we're either drawing this row or this one, so forth and so on, until the row is no longer less than or equal to user number. In terms of the column, well, we're going to start off with the column as 1, because we always have 1 column to draw, and then possibly 2, possibly 3, possibly 4, so forth and so on, depending on the row. So we'll start off every time before we enter this inner loop with the column being assigned 1. Now, for this inner loop, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, as long as the column is less than or equal to the number of stars per row, and over here you see that stars per row is equal to 1, right? The stars for this row has to be 1. Then we have to increment it by 1. The stars for this row, 2. How about the number of stars for this row? 3, so forth and so on. And that's why we are going to increment it by 1 over here. All right, so hey, if the number of columns is less than the stars that you're supposed to draw for this particular row, then we'll take the output, which is a string, which initially is set to nothing. We're going to concatenate that with a star. So if the output is blank, we're concatenating that with a star. So the new updated output is now going to have a single star. Let's increment the column by 1. Go back over here. And you're basically asking, have I drawn all my columns? If you haven't, let's go ahead and add another star to the column. So as long as the column is less than or equal to stars per row, in other words, as long as we have stars to draw on a given row, then yeah, we're going to keep on doing this over and over again. Finally, after the inner loop is finished, we got to get ready for the next possible iteration, for the next possible row. So we're ready to go to the next row because I've just finished drawing all the stars for a given column. So we'll say stars per row is going to be incremented by 1. So in this case, the number of stars was 1 for the first row. Now it's going to be 2 for the second row. We go to the beginning of the next line. So this escape sequence right here just simply means go to the beginning of the next line. So whatever the output data has, let's say that it has something like this. Let's say that it has a star, and that's it for that first row. Well, what this means is enter, go to the beginning of the next line. It's basically going to simulate what your enter key does. Then, since we're going to the next row, I say row plus plus. Now, could I have done this? Could I have said row is equal to row plus 1? Yeah, I could have done that, but I chose to do this approach. But you know what? Maybe I shouldn't do this because I just read that the plus plus is going to be deprecated in future versions of C++. So maybe we should just go ahead and get used to another shortcut such as plus equals 1. Say, for example, or if you wanted to, you could just simply say row is being assigned row plus 1, similar to what I did with the column is assigned column plus 1. All right, well, once you've got that, then we go again back to the top. As long as the number of rows is less than or equal to the user number, we're going to do this whole process all over again. Notice that column gets reset to 1 because if I draw this column for the next row, start off with the first column. Next row, start off with the first column. Always starting off with column 1. And then you're going to keep on incrementing for however many stars you need to draw. Okay, so let's see what happens. And then finally at the very end, I take that variable output and I send it out. So let me go ahead and run this program and let's take a look at what happens. So let me go ahead and enter a number like -5. Invalid input. Enter a whole number from 1 to 15. 23. Invalid input. Enter a number from 1 to 15. Okay, how about 6? All right, so we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows starting off with 1 column, then 2 columns for the next row, then 3 columns for the next row, and so forth and so on. Now we have our right triangle. Let's take a look at this. Let me break the code. Let's say right here. I want to break it just before I enter into the while statement. So let me go ahead and enter the number 5, say for example. All right, so our user number is 5, as you can see here. Our row is 1. Is the number of rows less than the user number? Yes, it is. So that's a true statement. So I'm going to go ahead and step over. Now we're inside of the while statement. I'm assigning 1 to column. Let me step over again. And now is 1 less than or equal to the number of stars per row? Well, in this case, it's 1. 1 is equal to, so that's a true statement. Therefore, we go into the while statement. Output is currently blank, as you can see over here. We are about to concatenate a star. So after I execute that statement, now you can see the value of output. Oops, sorry. Here we go. The value of output is that it has a star. Now let's take that column, which is currently 1, and let's increment it. So now column should be 2, and there it is. All right, we're finished with this. Let's now get ready for the next, let's do the next iteration. And so we keep on doing this where the column is 2. That's not less than or equal to 1. So we jump out. The stars per row, it was 1. Now it's going to be 2. Let's go ahead and take that output and let's send to it this escape sequence, which is \n, which basically is go to the beginning of the next line. So you can see what output looks like. And then let's increment the row. So it's currently 1. After I execute this statement, it's now 2. Let's go to the beginning of the top of the while statement. Row, which is now 2, is that less than or equal to the user number? Yes, it is. So we do this whole thing all over again. And so this is what's happening. Now let me go ahead and run up to this location. So let me right click. And I think that there's an item here that says run to cursor. There it is, run to cursor. So we're just going to go through everything and run here. So let me place my cursor there. Right click and say run to cursor. Oh, it keeps on going back over there. Oh, because I had that break right there. Sorry about that. So let me go ahead and say run to cursor. There we go. And so now we're about to take output, which as you can see is 1 star backslash n, 2 stars backslash n, 3 stars backslash n, so forth and so on. So this is basically drawing our right triangle. And now I will just click continue to see what the result is, and that's the result right there. So that's how you take while statements, turn them into a nested loop situation to be able to draw this right triangle. And that's it. So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.